The research vessel drifted quietly through the darkness of space, its sensors scanning the unexplored region near the outer rim. Captain Ji-Wan Kim stood on the bridge, watching the stars through the viewing screen. Her crew had been out here for 3 months, cataloging new systems and looking for signs of habitable worlds. It was peaceful work, the kind she loved. "Captain, we're picking up something on long-range sensors," said Minho Park from his station. The young engineer leaned forward, studying his displays with a frown. "It's big. Really big." Ji-Wan walked over to look at the readings. A massive ship was approaching their position, unlike anything in their database. Its hull was dark and covered in sharp angles, almost like a predator. "Try hailing them," she ordered. "Let's see if they're friendly." Minho sent out a standard greeting in multiple frequencies, the same message humanity used to introduce themselves to new species. They waited. Seconds turned into minutes. The alien vessel kept coming closer, not slowing down at all. On the Vrellic command ship, High Commander Talon studied the small human vessel with contempt. His species had conquered dozens of worlds, crushed hundreds of primitive civilizations. These creatures were no different. Their ship was tiny, barely worth his attention. But they were in Vrellic space now, whether they knew it or not. "They're trying to communicate with us," one of his officers reported. Talon's mouth twisted into something like a smile. "Ignore them. Charge weapons." Back on the human ship, alarms suddenly started blaring. Minho's hands flew across his console. "Captain, they're powering up weapons. Their targeting systems just locked onto us." Ji-Wan felt her stomach drop. "Shields up. Try hailing them again. Tell them we're a peaceful research vessel." But the Vrellic ship didn't respond. Energy built up in its massive cannons, glowing with deadly purpose. Talon gave the order with casual indifference, as if swatting an insect. "Fire." The blast tore through the human ship's shields like paper. Explosions ripped through multiple decks. The lights flickered and died. Emergency systems kicked in, bathing everything in red. Ji-Wan was thrown against her console as another hit shook the vessel. Hull breach on decks 3 and 4. Someone screamed. "We're losing atmosphere." Minho was already at the communication station, blood running down his face from a cut on his forehead. His hands shook as he activated the emergency beacon. If they were going to die out here, someone needed to know what happened. Someone needed to warn Earth. "This is the research vessel Horizon's Edge," he said into the recorder, his voice surprisingly steady. "We are under attack by an unknown alien force. They fired without warning. We attempted peaceful contact. They destroyed us anyway." Another explosion rocked the ship. Minho could hear people screaming in the corridors. "Tell our families we love them. Tell Earth ... Tell them to be careful out here. Not everyone wants peace." He hit the transmit button just as the final barrage struck the ship. The Horizon's Edge broke apart in a ball of fire and debris. 32 people died in those few seconds. 32 researchers, explorers, scientists who had only wanted to see what was beyond the next star. "Commander," Talon watched the human ship explode with satisfaction. "Clean sweep. Mark this sector as claimed territory. If there are more of these creatures, they'll learn to stay away." But one of his officers looked worried. "Commander, they sent a transmission before they died." It looked like a distress signal. Talon waved a clawed hand dismissively. "It doesn't matter. By the time anyone receives it, we'll have claimed all their worlds. This species is weak. They don't even have proper warships." He turned to his crew. "Set course for their nearest colony. We'll show them what happens when inferior species enter our space." The Vrellic fleet moved on, leaving only wreckage behind. They had no idea what they had just done. They didn't understand what kind of species they had just attacked. They thought humans were like the others, like all the frightened civilizations that had surrendered at the first show of force. They were wrong. 3 weeks later, the distress beacon reached Earth. It had traveled through subspace, bouncing through relay stations until it finally arrived at Terran command. A junior officer received it first, and within minutes, it was on the desk of the highest military authority in human space. Admiral Hyan Lei was a man who had seen war before. He had fought in the colony wars, had made decisions that cost lives to save others. He thought he had seen everything. But as he listened to Minho's final message, as he heard the fear and courage in that young man's voice, something cold settled in his chest. He played the message 3 times. Each time, he focused on different details. The sound of the explosions, the fact that there had been no warning, the desperate attempt at communication. These were researchers, not soldiers. Scientists, not warriors. And they had been killed for doing nothing except existing in the wrong place. The Admiral stood and walked to his window, looking out at Earth below. The blue and green world turned peacefully, unaware of what had just happened light years away. Hyan Li had spent his entire career trying to prevent war, trying to find peaceful solutions. But some things couldn't be forgiven. Some things demanded a response. He pressed a button on his desk. Convene the War Council immediately. Priority Alpha. His assistant's voice came through, confused. Sir, the War Council? But we're not at war with anyone. Admiral Hyan Li looked at the frozen image on his screen, the last few seconds before Minho Park died trying to warn his people. We are now, he said quietly. We just don't know it yet. Within hours, the War Council assembled. Military leaders, scientists, diplomats, all of them listened to the recording. They saw the data from the Horizon's Edge's final moments. They studied what little information they had about this new enemy. They call themselves the Vrelic Empire, reported the intelligence briefing officer. We've had some indirect contact through other species. They're one of the galaxy's major military powers. They've conquered over 40 worlds in the last century. And they just declared war on us, said Hyan Li. They destroyed one of our ships without provocation, without even attempting communication. And according to the beacon's telemetry, they're heading toward our colonies. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. The Vrelic were coming, and they thought humanity would be an easy target. They thought humans would surrender or run. They had made their calculations based on humanity's short time in space, on their limited territory, on their apparently simple technology. They had no idea who they were dealing with. They didn't know about Earth, about the death world that had forged humanity through millions of years of evolution. They didn't know about human history, about the wars and struggles that had shaped this species. They didn't understand what humans became when someone threatened their home. Admiral Hyan Li looked around the table at the grim faces of his colleagues. The Vrelic Empire has made a critical mistake. They've given us no choice but to respond. They've shown us they understand only force. He straightened his uniform. Very well. They want to see what humans are capable of? Let's show them. The message went out across all human space. The colonies were warned. The fleets were mobilized. Factories that had been building peaceful ships were retooled for war. Humanity, a species that had been exploring the stars with hope and wonder, now prepared for something they hadn't faced in generations. Total war. And the galaxy had no idea what was coming. The war room deep beneath Terran command was filled with holographic displays, showing human colonies scattered across dozens of star systems. Admiral Hyan Li stood at the center, surrounded by the best minds in human military and scientific communities. They had 48 hours before the Vrelic fleet would reach the first human colony. 48 hours to prepare for an enemy that had crushed 40 worlds. What do we know about them? Hyen Lee asked. Dr. Yoonji Choi stepped forward. She was the head of xenobiology, someone who had spent her career studying alien species and their capabilities. Now that knowledge would be used for war instead of understanding. The Vrelic are physically impressive, she began, pulling up images on the displays. Stronger than humans, faster reflexes, better eyesight in low light. They evolved on a world with slightly higher gravity, which makes them naturally more resilient. So we're outmatched physically, someone muttered. Eung smiled, but there was no humor in it. Physically, yes. In every other way that matters? No. She changed the display to show Earth. The Vrelic don't understand what kind of world produced humanity. Their planet is stable. Mild seasons. Abundant resources. They never had to really struggle to survive. She zoomed in on various regions of Earth. Humans evolved on a death world. We have deserts that can kill you in hours. Frozen wastelands where nothing should survive. Jungles filled with diseases and predators. Oceans that swallow ships whole. And humans spread to every single environment. We didn't just survive. We thrived. Captain Doyan Kong, one of the youngest fleet commanders, leaned forward with interest. What does that mean for the war? It means adaptability, Yoonji explained. The Vrelic fight the same way every time. They rely on overwhelming force and superior technology. But humans? We improvise. We adapt. We find solutions to impossible problems, because that's what we've always. Captain Doyan Kong's fleet had been hiding in the asteroid field, cold and silent, waiting for exactly this moment. His ships powered up and accelerated toward the Vrelic fleet, missiles already launching. All ships engage at will. Doyan ordered. Remember, we're not trying to win. We're trying to hurt them. The space battle began with devastating force. Human missiles slammed into Vrelic shields, testing their defenses. The Vrelic ships turned to face this new threat, powerful weapons charging. They expected the human ships to engage in traditional fleet combat, organized formations exchanging fire until one side broke. Instead, the human ships scattered. What are they doing? Talon demanded. Stand and fight, you cowards. But the human ships weren't running away. They were moving in unpredictable patterns, making themselves hard to target. Then, as Vrelic gunners struggled to track them, the human ships did something completely unexpected. Pilot Seojun Oh's fighter squadron dove straight toward a Vrelic carrier, far closer than safety protocols would normally allow. Target their sensor array, he ordered his wing. Make them blind. His fighters unleashed their weapons at point-blank range, destroying the carrier's external sensors. The huge ship was suddenly flying without being able to see properly. In the confusion, human bombers slipped through their defenses and struck at their engines. They're fighting like insects. Talon roared. No honor. No proper formation. His tactical officer looked worried. Sir, they're causing significant damage despite our technological advantage. Their tactics are extremely unpredictable. Meanwhile, on Hanzeong, the first Vrelic landing ships descended through the atmosphere. Ji-Hye watched them come, her heart pounding. Wait for it, she whispered into her communicator. Let them land. Let them think we're easy prey. The Vrelic ground forces disembarked from their ships, heavy armor and powerful weapons ready. They expected frightened civilians. What they got was something else entirely. The ground exploded beneath their feet. Colonists had buried mining charges all over the landing zone, turning it into a death trap. Vrelic soldiers were thrown through the air by the blasts. Before they could recover, human defenders opened fire from hidden positions in the buildings. Commander Yunibei led the colony's defense force, which consisted mainly of people who had never been soldiers before. But they knew how to fight dirty. They knew how to turn their home into a nightmare for invaders. Hit and run. Yuna shouted, "Don't stay in one place. Make them chase you into the traps." The Vrellic advanced into the colony, expecting to overwhelm the primitive humans through superior force. Instead, every building was a potential ambush. Every street had hidden explosives. The humans didn't fight in organized units. They fought like their ancestors had fought 10,000 years ago, like wolves hunting something bigger than themselves. Corporal Jun Ho Nam had been a farmer before the war. Now he crouched in a ruined building, waiting with a weapon made from mining equipment. He was already wounded, blood seeping through a makeshift bandage on his shoulder. But when 3 Vrellic soldiers entered his building, he attacked anyway. The Vrellic were stronger and faster. But Jun Ho was desperate and determined. He brought down one soldier with an explosion, traded shots with another, and somehow managed to survive long enough to kill a third before collapsing. When other humans found him later, barely alive, he was still gripping his weapon in orbit. Seo Jun-oh made a decision that would define the battle. His fighter had taken heavy damage, his systems failing, but he was still flying. Ahead of him, the Vrellic carrier was still operational, despite the beating it had taken. Its reactor core was exposed from earlier attacks. He opened a channel to his squadron. Seojon to all fighters. "I'm going in." His second-in-command understood immediately. "Sir, that's suicide." "Yeah," Seojon agreed calmly. "But it'll take that carrier with me. Get clear. Tell Captain Doyan. Tell him it was an honor." He cut the channel before anyone could argue, and aimed his crippled fighter at the exposed reactor core. Vrellic saw him coming, but didn't understand what he was doing until too late. Seojon's fighter slammed into the reactor at full speed. The explosion tore the carrier apart from the inside, destroying it completely and damaging 2 nearby ships. On his command ship, Doyan watched the explosion and closed his eyes briefly. They were winning, but the cost was terrible. Still, they were making the Vrellic bleed. That was the mission. Commander Talon couldn't believe what he was seeing. His forces were taking casualties at an impossible rate. The humans fought with a savagery he had never encountered. Even wounded, they kept fighting. Even dying, they tried to take Vrellic soldiers with them. "Sir, we've lost the carrier's strength of mountains," an officer reported. "The fierce storm and warrior's pride are badly damaged. Ground forces are requesting reinforcement. They say the humans are using dishonorable tactics." "Dishonorable?" Talon snarled. "They're animals, fighting without any sense of proper warfare." But even as he said it, he felt something unfamiliar. Doubt. The humans should have broken by now. They should have surrendered or retreated. Instead, they just kept fighting. On the ground, the battle raged for 6 more hours. The Vrellic eventually pushed through to the colony center, but every meter cost them dearly. By the time they reached the main square, they had lost over half their ground forces. Ji-hye Song stood in her command center, listening to reports. They couldn't hold much longer. The colony was being destroyed. But they had bought time. More than time, actually. They had shown the Vrellic that humans wouldn't give up. "Governor, Captain Doyan is requesting to speak with you," her communication officer said. Doyan's face appeared on the screen, smoke visible behind him on his ship's bridge. "Governor, we need to evacuate. We can get most of your people out if we leave now." Ji-hye looked around at her command staff, at the people who had fought so hard. She thought about the colonists still fighting in the streets, still refusing to surrender. "Do it," she said. "Get everyone out. But make sure the Vrellic knows we didn't surrender. We retreated." There's a difference. As human ships swooped down to evacuate the colonists, Jihei transmitted one final message to Commander Talon. "You can have our colony, Commander, but you paid for it in blood. And this is just one small world. Imagine what it'll cost you to take Earth." The evacuation ships lifted off under covering fire from Doyon's fleet. The Vrellic tried to stop them, but they were too battered and disorganized. Most of the colonists escaped, along with Jihei and her command staff. When the battle finally ended, Talon stood in the ruins of Hanseong's main square. His forces had won. The colony was theirs. But at what cost? He had started with 20 ships and 5,000 ground troops. Now he had 13 functional ships and barely 2,000 soldiers. 60% casualties to take one small colony. "This doesn't make sense," he said to his second officer. "They couldn't have won. Why did they fight so hard?" His officer had no answer. Neither of them understood yet what Dr. Yunji had tried to explain to the Terran War Council. Humans didn't calculate war the way other species did. They didn't fight based on odds of success. They fought because someone had attacked them, and that couldn't be forgiven. As news of the Battle of Hanseong spread across the galaxy, reactions varied. Some species were shocked that the humans had fought at all. Others were impressed by their determination. But a few elder species, those who had observed many civilizations rise and fall, shared knowing looks. In the Galactic Council chambers, an ancient being named Elder Quinn addressed the assembly. His species had been starfaring for 10,000 years. He had seen everything. "I warned you," he said quietly. "I told you to leave the humans alone. They are persistence predators from a death world. You cannot break a species like that. You can only make them angry." "But the Vrellic won," someone pointed out. "They took the colony." "Yes," Quinn agreed, "at the cost of 60% casualties. How many colonies can they take at that rate? How many before they run out of soldiers?" He looked around the council. "The Vrellic have made a critical error. They've shown humanity that they're mortal, that they can bleed, that they can be hurt, and now humanity will never stop hunting them." Back on Earth, Admiral Hyan Lei reviewed the battle reports with grim satisfaction. They had lost Hanseong, but they had accomplished something more important. They had shown the Vrellic that this war wouldn't be easy. They had proven that humanity could hurt them, and more importantly, they had learned how to fight them. "Prepare Phase 2, Hyan Li ordered. "The Vrellic think they've won a victory. Let's show them what a real war looks like." The Galactic Council meeting chamber was filled with representatives from hundreds of species, all watching the holographic display showing human territory. What had started as an amusing sideshow was now impossible to ignore. The humans weren't surrendering. Instead, they were attacking. Admiral Hyan Li had launched Operation Endurance 2 weeks after the Battle of Hanseong. While the Vrellic were still congratulating themselves on their victory, human fleets struck at 3 different Vrellic outposts simultaneously. The attacks came from directions the Vrellic thought were impossible, through routes that conventional military doctrine said couldn't be used. But humans weren't conventional. Intelligence officer Suman Han had spent the weeks since Hanseong studying Vrellic military patterns. Now she stood in a Vrellic command station, watching alien officers work, completely unaware of her presence. She had infiltrated the station, disguised as a maintenance worker from a neutral species. Her face was covered by a holographic mask. Her voice altered by technology. She accessed their computer systems with tools designed specifically for this purpose. Within hours, she had copied their entire strategic database, fleet positions, supply routes, command codes. Everything humanity needed to hurt them. As she made her escape, one Vrellic officer noticed something wrong. "Alert! Intruder in Section 7. Sumin ran, her human endurance letting her maintain a sprint that would exhaust most species. She reached her hidden ship and escaped just as Vrelic security arrived. By the time they realized what had happened, she was already transmitting the stolen data to Terran Command. "Got it," she reported to Admiral Hyan Lee. "Their entire strategic network. Every weakness, every supply line, everything." Hyan Lee smiled for the first time in weeks. "Good work. Now let's use it." The next phase of human attacks targeted Vrelic supply depots. Captain Doyan Kong led a strike force deep into enemy territory, hitting a massive depot that supplied 5 Vrelic fleets. His ships appeared without warning, destroyed the facility, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. The Vrelic were learning what it meant to fight humans. They couldn't predict where attacks would come from. They couldn't establish safe zones. Every victory cost them more than they could afford. And now they were losing supply lines too. Commander Talon, now promoted, but deeply troubled by what he had learned at Hanseong, reported to the Vrelic High Command. The leaders of his empire gathered in their war room, all of them confused by how this war was developing. "These humans fight without honor," one commander complained. "They strike from hiding, they use deception, they don't follow proper military protocols." "They're winning," Talon said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. "Not in the way we understand winning, but they're achieving their goals. Every battle costs us more than we can sustain. They don't try to defeat us in open combat. They just make sure we bleed for every meter of space we take." "Are you saying we cannot defeat them?" The High Commander's voice was dangerous. "I'm saying we didn't understand what we were starting," Talon replied. "I watched human soldiers keep fighting with injuries that should have killed them. I watched them sacrifice themselves just to hurt us. They don't fight to win battles. They fight to make the war too expensive for us to continue." The High Command didn't want to hear this. They ordered Talon to increase attacks on human colonies. Break their will to fight. Show them we cannot be stopped. But as the war continued, something unexpected happened throughout the galaxy. Other species started paying attention to humanity in a new way. Some saw opportunity. Some saw danger. All of them saw a species that refused to follow the established rules. On Earth, Dr. Yoonji Choi found herself in an unusual position. Neutral alien species were contacting her, wanting to understand humans better. Some were considering alliances. Others just wanted to make sure they never made the Vrelic's mistake. She met with a delegation from the Thurian Commonwealth, an old and peaceful civilization. Their ambassador looked at her with a mix of curiosity and concern. "Dr. Choi, my people have been studying the war. We've noticed something disturbing about human tactics." "What's that?" Yoonji asked. "You honor your enemies." The ambassador pulled up footage from the Battle of Hanseong. "After the battle, your people broadcast the names of every Vrelic soldier who died. You gave them military honors. Why would you do that?" Yoonji thought about how to explain it. "Because they were brave. They might be our enemies, but they were still warriors doing their duty. We honor that, even in war." The ambassador looked shocked. "But the Vrelic don't honor you. They call you animals. They say you fight without honor." "That's because they don't understand what honor means to humans," Yoonji said. "To us, honor isn't about following their rules. Honor is about remembering that our enemies are people too. It's about fighting hard, but not losing our humanity in the process." This concept spread through the galaxy. Species that had considered humans primitive and emotional began to see them differently. Here was a young species that could fight with terrifying effectiveness while still maintaining their moral principles. It was something most species had never seen before. Meanwhile, combat medic Narration was serving on the front lines, treating wounded from both sides. She had gained a reputation for refusing to distinguish between human and Vrelic wounded. If someone was hurt, she treated them. This baffled the Vrelic soldiers she saved. One Vrelic warrior, badly wounded in a skirmish, woke up in a human medical facility. He panicked, expecting torture or execution. Instead, Myray was checking his vital signs with professional care. "Why?" he asked in broken human language. "Why save enemy?" Myray looked at him steadily. "Because you're hurt. That's reason enough." She finished her work and moved to the next patient. "War will end someday. But if we become monsters to fight monsters, what's the point of winning?" The wounded relic didn't understand, but he remembered. When he was eventually exchanged in a prisoner swap, he told others about the human medic who had saved his life. The story spread through relic ranks, creating confusion and doubt about what they had been told about humans. The war escalated in new ways. Humans deployed weapons that shocked the galaxy. Kinetic bombardment platforms that could strike targets from orbit without using energy weapons. Electromagnetic pulse devices that disabled entire fleets without destroying them. The Prometheus missiles, weapons that could burn through relic. Shields using white-hot plasma. But what really disturbed the galaxy was human psychological warfare. After each battle, humans would broadcast the names of fallen relic soldiers. They would show images of relic warriors fighting bravely, accompanied by messages like, "These soldiers died with honor. We salute their courage." Then they would broadcast the names and faces of the humans killed aboard the Horizon's Edge. These were scientists, explorers, people who wanted peace. The relic killed them without warning. "We remember. We will always remember." This double message hit the relic harder than any weapon. They couldn't understand an enemy that honored them while also promising never to forgive them. It broke their understanding of how war was supposed to work. Captain Doyun Kong found himself commanding larger fleets as the war progressed. He had learned to think like the relic, to predict their moves, and then do the exact opposite of what they expected. His raids deep into enemy territory became legendary. Once, he captured an entire relic supply convoy without firing a shot, using electronic warfare to disable their ships and then towing them away. The relic high command was becoming desperate. They had assumed this would be a short war. Now it was draining their resources, killing their soldiers, and worst of all, making them look weak. Other species they had conquered were watching. If the relic couldn't defeat these primitive humans, what did that say about relic power? In the Galactic Council, the debate raged about intervention. Some species wanted to help the relic end this embarrassing conflict. Others wanted to see the relic humbled. A few wise voices urged everyone to simply stay out of it. Elder Quinn spoke again, his ancient voice carrying weight. "I have watched civilizations rise and fall for 10,000 years. I have seen empires that seemed eternal crumble to dust. And I tell you now, the relic have already lost this war. They just don't know it yet." "How can you say that?" Someone demanded. "The relic are still winning battles. They have more ships, more weapons, more resources." "Because wars are not won by ships and weapons alone," Quinn replied. "They are won by will, by determination, by the refusal to give up." The relic thought humans would break easily. Instead, they have learned that humans cannot be broken. That is a lesson that will cost the relic their empire. Back in human space, Admiral Hyen Lei was planning the next phase of operations. Suman's intelligence had given them everything they needed to strike at the heart of the relic empire. But there was a problem. If we strike too hard, we might collapse their entire government, Dr. Yunji warned. That could destabilize dozens of systems. "So what do you suggest?" Hyen Li asked. "We need to give them a way out," she said. "A way to end this war without destroying them completely. Not because they deserve mercy, but because we need the galaxy to see that humans fight to end wars, not to wage them forever." Hyen Li considered this. He was a military man, trained to win. But he was also human, and humans understood something that the Vrelic didn't. The best victory was one that didn't require continuing the war. We'll give them one chance, he decided. One offer of peace. But if they refuse, we'll show them exactly what humanity is capable of. The message was sent through neutral channels. Humanity offered a ceasefire and negotiations. The terms were simple: recognition of human sovereignty, reparations for the horizon's edge, and a mutual non-aggression pact. The Vrelic High Command rejected it immediately. They saw it as weakness. They thought humans were asking for peace because they couldn't continue the war. They were wrong. Admiral Hyan Lee looked at the rejection message and nodded slowly. Very well. They want to see what we're really capable of? They want to see what happens when you push humanity too far? He turned to his staff. Prepare Operation Shieldbreaker. We're taking the war to their home systems. It's time to end this. The Vrelic Worldbreaker fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. It was the largest military force the Vrelic Empire had ever assembled. 50 capital ships, 200 support vessels, and at its center, the Worldbreaker itself. The massive station was designed for one purpose: to destroy planets. Commander Talon stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching Earth on the display. The blue and green world hung in space, beautiful and fragile. He felt no satisfaction in what was about to happen, only a grim sense of duty. The High Command had made their decision. If humans wouldn't surrender, then humanity would be eliminated. All ships report ready, Commander, his tactical officer said. The Worldbreaker is charging its main weapon. Estimated time to firing solution: 6 hours. On Earth, alarms were already sounding. Admiral Hyan Lee stood in Terra-Born command, watching the enemy fleet approach. Every military analyst had said this might happen. If the Vrelic got desperate enough, they would try to end the war in one devastating blow. Evacuation status? He asked. Civilian populations in bunkers. Non-essential personnel being evacuated to Mars and the outer colonies. But Admiral, we can't evacuate everyone. Not in 6 hours. Hyan Lee had known this moment might come. He had prepared for it. Then we stopped them. Captain Doyon, report. Across the solar system, Captain Doyon Kang's fleet was already moving into position. They had been ready for this, waiting for the Vrelic to make their final desperate move. All ships responding, Admiral. We're outnumbered 3-1. I know. Can you stop them? Doyon looked at the tactical display, at the massive enemy force bearing down on humanity's home world. 3-1 odds. Against any other enemy, it would be suicide to even try. But the Vrelic had taught them something over the past months. Determination mattered more than numbers. We'll stop them, sir. Or we'll die trying. That's what I wanted to hear. Execute Operation Shieldbreaker. What the Vrelic didn't know was that while they had been gathering their fleet for this attack, humanity had been busy. Very busy. Intelligence officer Su-Min Han had spent weeks infiltrating not just Vrelic outposts, but their core systems. She knew things about their military that even most Vrelic commanders didn't know. And right now, she was aboard the Worldbreaker itself. Su-Min had entered the massive station 3 days ago, using forged credentials and a disguise as a Vrelic maintenance worker. She had studied their culture, their language, their mannerisms. She could pass as one of them, at least long enough to get where she needed to go. Now she crouched in a maintenance tunnel, tapping into the station's computer network. I'm in position, she whispered into her communicator. Ready to disable their main weapon on your signal. Acknowledged, came Admiral Hyan Lee's voice. Stand by. The space battle began with a fury that shocked even veteran commanders. Doyon's fleet didn't try to engage the Vrelic in traditional combat. Instead, they scattered like birds, forcing the enemy to split their forces. Human ships dove and weaved through the enemy formation, missiles and laser fire filling the space between planets. Commander Unibay led a strike force aimed at the Relic support vessels. Target their supply ships. Without ammunition and fuel, their big ships are just expensive targets. Her squadron moved with precision, destroying transport after transport while dodging enemy fire. But the Relic had learned from their earlier defeats. They had adapted, become more flexible in their tactics. They were no longer the overconfident warriors who had attacked the horizon's edge. This time, they fought with grim determination. Talon watched the battle unfold, his strategic mind processing everything. The humans are trying to delay us. They're buying time. For what? His question was answered when proximity alarms screamed across every Relic ship simultaneously. From the outer solar system, from hidden positions throughout the asteroid belt, from behind the moons of Jupiter, human reinforcements appeared. Not just ships from Earth, but vessels from every human colony, every station, every outpost. They had all come home to defend their birthplace. "Admiral Doyan, this is Colony Defense Fleet Hanziong," came a familiar voice. Governor Jihei Song commanded a small flotilla of ships crewed by the colonists who had fought so hard weeks ago. "We're here to repay our debt. Tell us where you need us." Doyan felt a surge of emotion. Ships kept appearing, more and more of them. Some were military vessels. Others were converted civilian ships, armed with whatever weapons humans could mount on them. Old transport ships flying next to new warships. Miners and farmers fighting alongside professional soldiers. All ships. "This is Captain Doyan Kong. Welcome to Earth. Now let's show these aliens what happens when they threaten our home." The battle became the largest military engagement in recorded galactic history. Thousands of ships from both sides engaged across millions of kilometers of space. The Relics still had superior numbers and technology. But humans had something else. They were defending their home, and that changed everything. Aboard the World Breaker, Sumin worked quickly. The station's main weapon was nearly ready to fire. She had minutes, maybe less. Her fingers flew across the console, inputting commands, bypassing security protocols she had spent months learning. Then a Relic security officer found her. "Intruder, alert." Sumin grabbed her weapon, but she knew she couldn't fight her way out. The station had thousands of warriors aboard. But she didn't need to escape. She just needed to finish her mission. She triggered the virus she had uploaded into the World Breaker's systems. It spread through the computer network like wildfire, corrupting targeting data, shutting down safety systems, scrambling command codes. The massive weapon began powering down, its charge dissipating. The security officer shot her, and Sumin fell, her body hitting the cold metal floor. She had done what she needed to do. The World Breaker was disabled. Earth was safe. On his flagship, Talon watched in horror as the World Breaker went dark. "What happened? Report." "Sir, the weapon is offline. Someone sabotaged our systems from inside the station." "From inside? How is that possible?" Then Talon understood. The humans had infiltrated his ultimate weapon. They had been inside his most secure facility, and he had never known. The realization shook him to his core. With the World Breaker disabled, the tide of the battle shifted. Human ships pressed their advantage, driving deep into the Relic formation. Combat medic Narration was aboard a hospital ship, treating casualties as they came in. Human wounded, and when Relic escape pods were recovered, she treated them too. One badly wounded Relic soldier was brought to her. He was dying, his injuries too severe. But Myray worked on him anyway, trying to save his life. The soldier looked at her with confusion and pain. Why? He asked the same question other Relic had asked. Why help enemy? Myray didn't stop working. Because the war is ending. And when it's over, we all have to live with what we've done. I'd rather live knowing I tried to save lives, not just take them. The soldier died anyway, but my Ray had tried. She always tried. Even in the middle of the largest battle humanity had ever fought, she refused to become the monster that war wanted her to be. The battle raged for 12 hours. Ships burned and died on both sides. Brave people made sacrifices, human and Vrelic alike. But slowly, inexorably, the Vrelic fleet began to break. They had come expecting an easy victory. Instead, they found themselves in a grinding war of attrition. And humans were very, very good at attrition warfare. Commander Talon's flagship took a critical hit. His bridge erupted in sparks and flame. He was thrown from his command chair, his armor cracked and broken. His crew worked desperately to control the damage, but the ship was dying. "Sir, we need to evacuate." "No," Talon said. "We came here to end this war. One way or another, it ends today." He opened a channel to the human fleet. "This is Commander Talon to human forces. I request to speak with your commander." Dayan's face appeared on the screen, his uniform torn and blood-stained, but his eyes steady. "This is Captain Doyan Kong. What do you want, Commander?" "To stop the killing," Talon said simply. "We can't win this battle. We came to destroy your world, and instead, you're destroying us. But if we keep fighting, thousands more will die on both sides. I'm offering surrender. Not because I'm weak, but because I'm tired of watching my people die for a war we should never have started." Doyan looked at the Vrelic commander for a long moment. He thought about Ji-won Kim and her crew aboard the Horizon's Edge. He thought about the colonists of Han Seong. He thought about every human who had died because the Vrelic had been arrogant and cruel. But he also thought about what Dr. Yunji had said. Humans fight wars to end them, not to win them. "Cease fire," Doyan ordered his fleet. "All human ships, cease fire. Let's hear what the commander has to say." The space battle slowed and stopped. Ships from both sides hung in space, weapons still hot, but no longer firing. It was a strange, tense moment. The war balanced on a knife's edge. Talon's ship was rescued by human vessels. When he was brought aboard Doyan's flagship, wounded and defeated, he expected execution or imprisonment. Instead, he found Myre Shin waiting to treat his injuries. "You saved my life," he said, recognizing the medic from reports his soldiers had given. "Even though I came here to destroy your world." "Yes," Myre said, cleaning his wounds. "That's what I do. I save lives. Even lives that maybe don't deserve saving. Why?" Talon asked again. "How can your species be so gentle and so fierce at the same time?" It was Admiral Hyan Lee who answered, entering the medical bay. "Because we're human, Commander. We know what it means to suffer. We know what it means to struggle. And we decided long ago that we would never lose our compassion, no matter what. Yes, we fight wars. Yes, we can be terrifying when pushed. But we never forget that our enemies are people too." Talon looked at these humans who had defeated him, and he understood finally why his empire had lost. It wasn't superior technology or numbers. It was this strange combination of ferocity and mercy. They fought hard enough to win, but never lost sight of what they were fighting for. "I am authorized to negotiate terms," Talon said. "What do you demand?" Admiral Hyan Lei sat down across from the Vrelic commander. "First, full recognition of human sovereignty over our territories. Second, reparations for the destruction you've caused. Third, the Vrelic Empire will be demilitarized under galactic supervision. Fourth, you will work with us to ensure this never happens to another species." Talon expected harsh terms, enslavement, the complete destruction of his empire. These terms were almost generous. That's all? That's all, Hyan Li confirmed. We didn't fight this war to conquer you. We fought it to make you stop. Now you've stopped. So the war is over. The peace treaty was signed aboard Doyon's flagship while the two fleets watched. News spread across the galaxy instantly. The war that had captivated every species was over, and it had ended in a way no one expected. The Vrelic Empire didn't fall, but it was transformed. Under human supervision, they began reforming their military culture, learning new ways to think about strength and honor. It was a difficult process, but Talon and others who had fought humans became advocates for change. Dr. Yoonji Choi was appointed as Earth's first ambassador to the Vrelic Empire. She worked tirelessly to build understanding between the species, to ensure that the lessons of the war were never forgotten. Ray Shin established an interspecies medical exchange program. Soon, Vrelic doctors were learning from humans, and humans from Vrelic. The medic who had saved enemy lives became a symbol of what peace could look like. Commander Yunabei was promoted to general and given command of the new Galactic Peacekeeping Force, a military organization designed to prevent wars before they started. Both humans and reformed Vrelic served under her command. Sumin Han recovered from her injuries, though it took months. She received the highest military honor humanity could give, but she retired from active service. She had seen enough war for one lifetime, and Captain Doyon Kong became Admiral Doyon Kong, youngest fleet commander in human history. His role wasn't to fight wars anymore, but to prevent them. He traveled the galaxy, showing other species what humans were capable of, but also showing them human values, compassion, determination, and the belief that even enemies could become friends. 5 years after the war ended, a memorial was built at the site where the Horizon's Edge had been destroyed. Representatives from every galactic species attended the dedication, including a delegation of Vrelic led by Talon himself. Admiral Hyan Lai, now retired, gave the dedication speech. We stand here today to remember 32 people who wanted only to explore, to learn, to understand. Their deaths started a war that cost thousands of lives. But from that tragedy came something unexpected: understanding. The Vrelic learned that strength isn't about dominating others. We learned that winning a war isn't the same as winning peace. He looked at the gathered crowd, at humans and aliens standing together. These 32 souls didn't want to be remembered for starting a war. So let them be remembered instead for ending one. Let them be remembered as the reason we came together, the reason we learned to see each other not as enemies, but as fellow travelers through this galaxy. Talon stepped forward, his posture respectful. On behalf of the Vrelic people, I apologize. We were arrogant. We were cruel. We thought might made right. He looked at the human faces around him. You taught us differently, not through conquest, but through example. You defeated us in battle, but lifted us up in peace. That is a lesson my people will never forget. In the crowd, Governor Jihye Song stood with their fellow colonists from Hanxiang. They had rebuilt their colony, and now both humans and Vrelic live there together. It wasn't always easy, but it worked. 50 years later, the war was taught in schools across the galaxy. Human and Vrelic children sat side by side, learning about the mistakes of the past and the hope of the future. The lesson was always the same. War should be the last resort, and even in war, never lose sight of peace. The story of humanity's rise to galactic prominence became legendary, not because they were the strongest or the smartest, but because they showed the galaxy something it had forgotten. That true strength comes from knowing when to fight and when to show mercy. And across the galaxy, whenever a species became too aggressive, whenever someone thought about starting a war, they would hear the same warning that had saved countless lives. Don't start a war with humans. Not because you'll lose, though you probably will, but because if you do lose, they'll make you their friend. And somehow, that's even more terrifying.